Welcome back to the Growing Revolution. My name is Eric with Smart Pot Fabric Planters, and we are really excited for today's episode. We have a special guest, none other than Dr. Earth himself, founder and CEO of Dr. Earth, Milo Shamus. Milo, how you doing today?
Good morning. I'm doing well. How are you, Eric?
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. I have a number of interesting questions that our viewers, I think, would love to hear about your background, how you started up the company, and where you're going. So I guess let's rewind. Can you describe your introduction into gardening and who introduced you into this awesome industry?
Um, it was, just a complete accident, really. My mother turned me on to gardening when I was 6 years old, and so I started I took a passion in it, and it was not so certain that it was my mother's influence. I know that's a huge part of it, but I had a personal interest in the garden, and right after she turned me onto it, I happened to study the lesson between the Pilgrims and Indians in third grade, and how the Indians taught the Pilgrims to bury their fish carcass at the base of the corn stalk and feed it that way, so nothing goes to waste. And I just happened to learn that lesson. And my father took me fishing. I grew up in Los Angeles. He took me on the half-day boat in Santa Monica, and I just saw these guys, the deckhands filleting all the fish fillets and then throwing everything else overboard. So I went up to the deckhand. I said, "Hey, can I have that waste material, take it home for my mom to garden with?" And we did. And she, like a great mother, she allowed me to use it in the backyard. We had a bumper crop, best vegetable garden we ever had. So it was at that moment that I realized, okay, I think there's something here that's way bigger than me. I'm supposed to do this. And, one thing leads to another. Very first elective, junior high school, was botany. Aced the class. So, I just kind of grew into it. Then I went off to college and I studied plant biology and just became an organic gardener. It's really in my DNA. Eric, it's just who I am. I love to garden. I love 17 years old when the other kids were drinking Coca-Cola and eating donuts and stuff like that. I was drinking.
Back before juicing was like, the thing to
Oh
do.
yeah, there was only one juice bar in Los Angeles. It was called the Beverly Hills Juice Club, even though it wasn't in Beverly Hills. It was, but anyways, it was the coolest place. It was near my father's shop, so I'd go there after school. And I got turned on to juicing. So really, just that's a quick summary of everything organic, everything natural, and just the garden being a really clean place for a guy like me in Los Angeles that doesn't, you don't really have access to agriculture. Growing up in the city, everything is concrete, so the backyard seems to be the only natural place for someone like me. So that was kind of
Yeah.
the impetus and how I fell in love with gardening.
So you started Dr. Earth out of your parents' garage with a generous loan from your father. Can you describe the beginnings of the company and how you started it and launched it?
I was 24 years old, and I had this crazy idea of starting an organic fertilizer company. And back then, there really wasn't, there was one company doing organics, but they weren't very successful. Um, from the time I was about 19 to 23, I was doing extensive experimentation with biologicals. And what really started it for me was I was using biologicals that were designed for bovine digestive tract. So really, there was no soil inoculant. There was inoculants for bovine animals to digest all of the hay and the feed that they're eating. And one of my dear friends, a microbiologist, had this company in Florida, and I was telling him, what I was doing. He said, it might be really cool. He goes, let me send you some of these biologicals we use to decompose organic materials inside the intestines of bovine animals, and just experiment with them, see what you come up with. And I did, and I did that for 2 years, and I noticed, very, very quickly that the efficacy of the organic materials that I was using back then were being digested literally 3 to 4 times as quickly as they were without biologicals. So that was really that was, the disruptive idea that really allowed me to enter a very crowded space back then. I mean, besides fertilizers being crowded and a very tight industry,
Hmm.
there was nobody doing anything organic. So here I am at 24 years old. I invent the very first probiotic fertilizer. My father is a very humble man. He's a tailor. So it's not like he's a stock market, broker. 40,000 for him is like, earned one stitch at a time is a lot of money for him. A lot of money.
That's his nest egg,
It was
probably.
everything. But he gave the other kids in the family a chance, and he said, "I've given everybody else a chance. Here's your chance. Let's see what you can do with it." So he gave me forty thousand
Nice.
dollar loan, and I use the word loan because it's important. It took me 10 years, but I paid my father back every single penny he let me borrow. By the way, I'm the only kid out of all the kids he's helped that's ever paid a penny back. Um, so I'm very proud of that. Not only have I paid my loan back, but I've been able to pay that loan back 10 tenfold. Just, obviously it's family. So I mean, he gave me the opportunity of a lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only have you paid your father back, but how many countless gardeners have has Dr. Earth benefited, over the years. Kind of getting into that, the name Dr. Earth seems like an obvious name for a company like what you were putting together. Did you come up with the name Dr. Earth, or how did that come
Yeah, I
into
did.
being?
I'm very proud of that. Actually, that's my mark. And used to live with a yellow patterned, pen next to my bed so I can capture my thoughts. So, was putting the company together, and besides formulas, coming up with a brand name was very important to me. It took me about 7 months, but I finally, when it came to me, maybe 3 or 4 in the morning, I wrote it
Hmm.
down, and that was the only time that when I woke up in the morning, I had, 10 brand names that I had jotted down throughout the night. But Dr. Earth, it just seemed like the most natural name. It's a healing name. It just, it is what it says it is. I mean, it gives back to the earth. It heals. It's everything I wanted to do was to heal the earth and to do it in a very environmentally conscious way.
Yeah. Now, when you started Dr. Earth and you started, pitching to, I'm assuming you started locally, local garden centers. Was it well received, or did it take some convincing? And how did you win over your skeptics?
It was not easy. It was really not easy. I mean, first of all, you've got this really young guy, 25 years old. I didn't have any distributors. I was selling everything out of the back of my pickup truck. And the very first account that I was able to establish was Sunset Boulevard Nursery,
Great
right in the heart
nursery.
of Hollywood. Yeah, they're great, phenomenal. And the owner, Dennis Kuga, has turned out to be a great mentor and just a great friend over the years. He still carries Dr. Earth, and he gave me my chance. I mean, he was the first one to stock it, and then he introduced me to other independent nursery owners in Los Angeles. And about 2.5 years after that, Eric, I was finally picked up by distribution, L&L Distributors. They were the very first ones to pick us up. And this was in 1997.
Nice, nice. Now, would you say 97 is kind of when you went from startup to the next level of Dr. Earth and distribution?
Absolutely, yes. Because I started the company in 92, and that's when, we landed the very first account in 1992. But it took me about 5 years of direct selling and, just getting enough placement to where a distributor would actually look at you. And
Yeah.
that took me 5 years. So yes, 97 was definitely the tipping point for the company.
I think that's a great thing for people to keep in mind, especially young entrepreneurs. They see Dr. Earth products in, every shelf, of a store that's selling gardening products, but it took a lot of hard work to get to that point.
Eric, I didn't turn a penny. I mean, in terms of profitability, one of the things that I cannot reinforce enough to young entrepreneurs and just to young people with a dream, any dream, is that you have to be patient and you can't give up on your ideas. I didn't turn a single penny in profit for about 7.5 years. I literally had 4 jobs at the same time.
Yep.
While I was running Dr. Earth, doing that on the weekends, I grew up in Hollywood, so I was, working in the Hollywood and, the movie industry. My older brother's an architect and a contractor, so I was swinging the hammer whenever I could to, earn money. I was also doing landscaping work, and then I would do Dr. Earth on the weekend. So I mean, I had four jobs at the time, and it took me over 7 years before I turned my very first dollar of profit. So yes, persistence. If you believe in something strongly enough, you'll get there. And that's the one thing I always reiterate to young people. Just stick to it. If you really believe you're doing something great, don't give up. Your dreams will come true.
Yeah, and anything worth having is worth working hard at, and anything worth having generally doesn't come easy. So, stick to it and you'll get to where you want to be eventually, right?
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Now let's get into your products. I know when you were first starting out making your products, like fish inputs were a big ingredient. What are some of your favorite ingredients that you use to compose Dr. Earth's product line? And, can you tell us anything unique about your production process?
Yeah, I can. Let's just hit the dry fertilizers first because that's how I started the company was building a dry fertilizer line. And I haven't changed the recipe much over the years. But remember the story about, the Pilgrims and Indians. I use fish bone meal as the base ingredient, and I also use fish meal and kelp meal. These are the base ingredients for the product line. Whereas my competitors use chicken manure, and they're two totally different worlds. So
Mm-hmm.
one thing that makes us very different than most people we compete against is that we're a fish bone company. We do not use any manures, period. And that's a huge differentiator, Eric, because a ton of fish bone is $1,200, $1,300, and you can get a ton of chicken manure for about $50 to $60. So there's a real material value, a huge difference between the inputs that we use and what's available to us out there. We can cheapen the product and make massive amounts of additional profits, but it's not the right thing to do. It'll create an inferior product. So that's the big deal with what we do with the dry fertilizers. Pardon me. As you know, as Dr. Earth became more popular over the years, I'd say in 98, 99, we had the very first knockoff product where they began to use microbes and mycorrhizal species as well. So I don't have a patent on probiotics, first one to do it. So that's not a big differentiator these days because most of my competition buys biologicals from the very same people we buy biologicals from. But it's still, the core inputs are very different. I mean, chicken manure versus fish bone, two different worlds.
Yeah, and I think, you get what you pay for in life. And, just kind of thinking about manure has already gone through a digestive process, whereas, kelp meal, fish meal, and bone meal has yet to be digested by microbes. So you're getting it, one step ahead in the process with what you're using.
Precisely. And there's also the salt index. I mean, manures have a really high salt index, which
Yeah.
is phytotoxic to plants. So
Yep.
that's not good. Also, whenever you use manures, you're also passing along pathogens. I mean, E. coli, salmonella, not every time, but they do exist in manures, and especially in chicken manures. And you remember the whole Jack in the Box fiasco? That was all chicken manure based. How about the 92 people that passed away in California from that whole spinach deal? It took them 4 years to put to finally figure out what it was, but it was chicken manure that a guy had used on his organic field. And they learned that as he was using overhead irrigation, they learned that as the water was splashing on the ground, the manure was splashing up on the foliage.
Wow.
So these poor people were just simply taking spinach that they thought was grown organically and selling it to consumers saying, hey, you've got a great ingredient, great product because it's certified organic.
Sure.
So, manures, they carry a host of potential problems. I'm not saying it's a problem every time,
Sure.
Eric, but you avoid these problems by making choices that eliminate it and really minimize the risk.
Yeah, yeah, and when you're using manures, you can use too much, whereas good clean organic fertilizers, you could practically dump the whole bottle, in the soil, and the plants will only take up what they can take up then.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the microbes, they're the greatest buffer because, they can only digest so much.
Yep.
And because they're not water soluble, it's not like whatever you put on the soil has to be absorbed within a 24-hour period. Otherwise, it leaches through the soil, and
Right.
the plants never have access to it. So, just that whole process of organic materials decomposing and being digested slowly, it's kind of like the perfect way to eat, even for human beings. Slow, consistent, 3 square meals a day, as opposed to the buffet mentality, which is kind of like, here it is, triple 20. It's all available all at one time. Eat as much as you can. I'm not going to feed you again for 6 weeks. And there's a real dynamic with that. I mean, the way we feed plants is they get to eat all the time for the 6 week period and slowly. So that also has an environmental implication as well. Because the soil, because I'm sorry, plants or plant roots are able to absorb 100% of the fertilizer that's been applied, that means you have zero waste. So if you spend a little bit more up front and you use an organic material that is just more recalcitrant and takes a little bit longer to break down, that's okay because your roots will be able to access 100% of it, as opposed to saving a few dollars and putting something that's completely soluble, or even manures. Chicken manure is highly soluble. I mean, I know it's an organic material, but it's a highly soluble material. And if the plant roots can't use it immediately, then the majority of it washes away. So I think there's a huge difference between that mentality and that sort of thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, kind of going into the environment, what is Dr. Earth doing for the environment, and I guess maybe in the grand scheme of things, corporate wise.
I'm very proud to say that I run the only carbon negative company in the lawn and garden industry. And the way I'm able to do that is I bought a retired Air Force base, 160 acres. And it consists of 4 different parcels, 10 buildings, so on and so forth. So we make everything here on site. Soils, fertilizers, insecticides, weed killers, everything's made here. But I also put 125 acres of that 160 acres in a conservation easement so that it can never be developed. So what we do is I only have 7 of them. They're pets, 7 cows, which is just perfect for them to graze 125 acres. And they really just do it just to keep the grass nice and knocked down for me. They're very healthy. So I feed them that way. They're pets. Secondly, we also have a CCOF, certified organic farm, here on the property. And what I do is nothing ever leaves the facility. If it makes it on the factory, quote, slash farm, we use everything. So we also grow tomatoes, vegetables, and really just a host of different edibles. Give them to our workers to take home, and the rest we donate to the food bank. So we don't throw anything away, Eric. Nothing. So if there's, let's say hypothetically, something's damaged in shipping or something along those lines, we gladly take it back because we use it to grow more grass for the cows, or use it to grow more tomatoes and cucumbers and melons or whatever we're growing to feed the community and give back to the workers.
Nice.
It's enough to simply say, well, I have an organic product. Yes, it's good. It's better than saying I have a chemical product. But what does that really do? Anybody can buy a commodity, put a brand name on it, but not really have any material impact on the environment. And what we do does have a huge material impact because our factory doesn't pollute, doesn't double ship anything. Also, a lot of the vegetables that we grow here on site, we also press and we make more fertilizer out of it. So we grow our own fertilizer as well as recycling materials from supermarkets, organic materials from supermarkets. So really, I mean, when you talk about the liquid part of what we're doing, it's anything you would see at the supermarket in the perishable aisle.
Yeah, they're just going to throw it away anyways, so you might as well turn it into a fertilizer product.
Absolutely, yes. So we're doing both. We're turning it into a fertilizer product, and we're also turning it into pet foods as well.
Oh, nice.
plant-based pet food. So there's a lot of neat stuff that we're doing.
Awesome. Now, I thought I saw somewhere also that you guys were doing something with your bottling.
Yes, we're ocean bound certified. So we use plastic that is post-consumer. And what's really cool about the whole ocean bound relationship is that this is not something we're going out to the ocean and harvesting plastics that have already polluted the ocean. We go to third world countries. We pay local villagers to collect their own trash that never made it into the ocean, that was never washed into the ocean. And in these third world countries, we have equipment there. And what we do is we shred everything up, melt it down, ship it back to the U.S. where we make our bottles in Southern California.
Now, kind of getting back into, organic ingredients, you had mentioned that, chicken manure especially would be kind of an inferior ingredient. Are there any other organic materials that you think gardeners should maybe be aware of, or, if they're not, if they shouldn't stay away from it entirely, to at least, be conscious of, where it's coming from and what it is?
Um,
Or is it mainly manure products that people should really be conscious of?
that's the only one that worries me, and it's not so much chicken manure. I don't have really anything against chicken manure. I just think that the chicken manure that's being packaged up is it has the most potential for pathogens because it's factory farming. Now, if somebody has chickens in their backyard and they're able to rake up the manure and compost it and use it in their own garden, and that's usually 99.99% of the time very safe. And I actually like that kind of chicken manure. It's just the factory farm chicken manure that I'm very, that's what worries me because of the conditions that these chickens are grown in. Also, there's the humane factor. It's a very, inhumane way to farm anything. I'm not a fan of it. So, I mean, I've always said that just because it's organic doesn't
Right.
mean it's good. You know, nicotine sulfate is organic, but it doesn't necessarily mean that
Sure,
it's
sure.
good.
And then also,
Uh,
with the input
it's usually
ingredients
the
that these
lowest of the
animals are
rung,
consuming and other
the very lowest,
materials.
all GMO contaminated. Plus, to make sure that their chickens don't get sick, they have to pump them full of antibiotics and hormones to fatten them up. So, I mean, these poor chickens are getting the worst of everything: conditions, food, the worst quality food, and then we have these companies raising their hands saying, "Hey, we're great, we're organic, and we're certified organic," and they're taking this waste and having it certified organic and misleading consumers into believing, well, it's certified organic, it must be good. That doesn't always necessarily translate to the truth.
Right. So, speaking of GMOs, what are your general thoughts on GMO technology and farming? Is there a place for it, or should we just try and avoid it altogether?
You know, this is one that I was in my first book. I really focused on this, did a lot of research. As you know, I'm from Vacaville, so Genentech is just down the street from me here. And in '96, when that was released, where the very first organism was actually released up here, and you know, I, it's almost letting the genie out of the bottle. It's really almost impossible to put it back in. And there's just some things in life that I don't understand enough to have to be able to make a decision, about how the world should be touched and who gets to play God in a situation like that. And the reason why I'm not a big fan of GMOs is because anytime you take something and you alter it, unless you give it enough time and have enough historical data to prove that it's safe, you're still kind of dancing with the unknown. And for that reason, I'm not a big fan of it. Now, sure, things in nature are going to, be hybridized. Just they come together, and that's how you get different species. But when you take something out of a nucleus and you change the molecular structure to do something different or behave differently, I personally am not a fan of it. I don't, eat GMO foods and I don't use anything GMO in my company. But, there's a lot of people that believe there's a place for it more on the medical side. And I believe there may be, if we're talking about genetically modifying a kidney or a liver or something to keep human beings alive, then there's probably you will need genetically modified technologies. But I think it's two different things. I think when you and I say, well, hey, should we genetically modify alfalfa so that this way, when we spray it with, Roundup Ready weed killer, that it controls everything and let it be what it is. I don't think that that's necessary. Is there a place for it? As I said, using the stem cell technology or to grow organs and other body parts to keep people alive, I'd probably say that I would agree with it. I mean, if somebody in my family were sick and that's the only way we're going to save them, I'm sure you would feel the same exact way. Let's use it.
Sure. Yeah. I totally agree that, once you let the genie out of the bottle, it's very hard to put him back in. And, a lot of this technology, yeah, we've done the research in laboratories, but, real world, we don't know if GMO salmon is going to take over the ocean and totally displace, what's naturally out there. So, I'm with you. I'm a technology guy, but I'm also a little skeptical as well. Now, let's see. Now, what do you think about people who have grown organically and have not had good results? I'm thinking that it's because they were using, just the organic input ingredients and probably not the microbiology to go with it. What do you think about that?
I think that's exactly right. That was the birth of Dr. Earth, was to solve organic materials having such a bad reputation because they didn't work, or the perception was they didn't work. And by the time the gardener became so frustrated and actually used a chemical product, it was just enough time for the microbes to build up their colonies to a large enough size to break the organic materials down. Eric, it also depends on like how living the soil is. If you've been an organic gardener for a few years, even if you never use an inoculant, you should have enough biodiversity and biology in the soil to break organic materials down. If you're dealing with a sterile soil or somebody that's been gardening chemically and now they all of a sudden want to go organic and they say, well, I can just use, for example, pure alfalfa meal or pure fishbone meal, and they don't get the results. It's simply because there are no microbes in the soil to break it down. It's kind of like you and I. Unless there's beneficial organisms inside our body, whenever we eat something, we can't break it down. So then the soil is very much the same way. You have to have living organisms in the soil. And I think you're spot on when you say without the biology, organics don't work. That's just a fact.
Yeah. I had a great mentor a number of years back by the name of Harley Smith. And the biggest thing that he drove home to me was plants cannot absorb large organic molecules. They have to be first broken down by microbes. And really using organic fertilizers without the microbes is, you're really missing the whole point.
Exactly. Yeah, no, he's a smart man.
Now, what is Dr. Earth working on currently to, either innovate your existing product line or having new products come down the line? I know the company's been in existence for a few decades now, and, organic gardening has been around really as long as we've been growing plants, technically.
That's right.
Is there anything cool that you guys are working on for the future?
I'm always working on something, Eric, but
Can't divulge.
people need to learn. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. After product launch, you'll learn what I'm working on. But we're always doing some really cool stuff. The last thing we just did was come out with a soil detox, and basically this was for the gardeners. I mean, just post COVID, all of a sudden there was this mad rush for city people to start gardening at home. And one of the things that I learned when I was a kid, growing up in Los Angeles, I remember like, all of my friends' dads, they changed the motor oil and just dump it in the backyard. I mean, no one was told any wiser. I mean, it was the clean paint thinner, everything. And so then all of a sudden these, gardeners want to garden organically and they're just planting in soil in homes that have been in existence for over 200 years. And can you imagine the pollution that homeowners that, just using their backyard as their dumping ground, literally. So what I did is I came up with a really cool formula that absorbs and neutralizes and locks up these metals and petroleums and other lacquers and just things that are not necessarily good for your plants to absorb. So that's called Clean, Dr. Earth Clean, and it's a soil detox. And we just released that. That was my latest and greatest invention, and I'll try to keep doing cool stuff like that.
Nice, nice. Um, Now, what do you think is the biggest challenge for the soil and fertilizer industry now and then going forward?
I think we're at an inflection point right now. I think you've got, marketing dollars are so powerful that, and especially with us gardeners, unless you're a diehard gardener like you and I, who live in this industry and live in this space, and it's all we think about 24 hours a day. If you're the typical homeowner gardener, you're told a message, and you're at, your local nursery maybe once, maybe twice a year to buy a fertilizer product. And all you get is this message from, on television saying, well, this is the greatest thing, it's certified organic, so on and so forth. And it goes back to manures. I mean, so I think there's a lack of education or companies divulging the complete truth about organics. So I think there's that because we forget. I mean, if we're only buying something twice a year, we tend to forget what we studied 10 months ago or 11 months ago. And it's very different with the food industry. With the food industry, when we lock into an idea, we're typically buying that food product on a weekly basis. So it's relevant, it's current in mind, top of mind. So we tend to stay on top of it. But with the fertilizer industry, I still think you've got this major pull push, with traditional synthetic products and companies that have been making traditional synthetics now making organic products, and the messaging that they're sending out to new gardeners. And I think there's just a lot of confusion there.
Yeah,
With not everything organic is necessarily good.
makes sense. Yeah, I was checking out your products, and your pump and grow line makes a lot of sense to me. Can you please describe that the thought process behind what came into that product coming into being, and why that's ideal for soil and plants?
It's all food based. So what's in Pump and Grow is what we grow here at the facility, the leftover vegetables we don't eat. But it also comes from like your Whole Foods, your markets that have a certified organic department. And we have a partner that what they do is they literally harvest the perishable material. So the reason why I can take one of our Pump and Grow products and just put it directly in my mouth because it was a human grade food product,
Mm-hmm.
not more than 6 weeks before that. Full, whole lobster, whole fish, whole, chicken breast, not chicken manure, whole chicken breast. So anything that's perishable, lettuce, tomatoes, anything, that's what makes up that product, and that's why it's so safe. So, to me, I thought, wouldn't it be really cool if we can just put it in a pump dispenser? And so that this way you can kind of walk around, put a few pumps per container, and it's so safe that if you didn't water it down immediately, you can come and water it even after a couple of hours. So that was the birth of that idea, to put something in the soil that you didn't have to make a concoction of, because as guys we tend to love to make mixes, and it's we don't mind with the mess and all that, but not every consumer wants that. I mean, a lot of people just want something that's really easy. They just want to walk around with a pump, squirt it into the container. It's easy, and now they can have access to the highest quality ingredients, but with a really easy to use applicator, and that was the thought process behind that.
Yeah, I think people in general want things easy and simple, but they also want the best. So if we can give them the best plants, but make it super simple for them, all the better. Now, Smart Pots being the original fabric growing container. All of our customers are obviously container growers. Do you have any tips for container growers in general when using Dr. Earth products?
I do. I think that with all containers, It all depends on when you're planting. I mean, if you're just, some people just fill the container up and then plant in it later, or they'll plant in it right away. When using a dry fertilizer, I always like to take the opportunity of putting it a little deeper into the soil and allow the roots to grow into it. That seems to be one of the best methods that I've learned over the years. And then use the liquid fertilizer to feed it, because then that'll just make its way down and saturate the entire soil material. That's the one big tip I would say, is like make sure that the roots have something to grow into. Now you can homogenize the entire blend. If you're growing indoors, I don't recommend that because of the odor, and it's going to attract fungus gnats, so on and so forth. And that's the reason why the liquids are typically much better, because of the odor issue, to be used indoors. Now, if you're an outdoor grower, absolutely homogenize the dry fertilizer with the soil material, put it in the smart pot. You're good to go. Then when you want to feed it later on, you can use any liquid fertilizer. I mean, I know you guys make from very small grow bags to industrial size grow bags. So a pump and grow is not going to really work well for one of your 1 yard containers, but then they can use a liquid product any way they choose to at a later point. That would be the
Yep.
one big tip
Yep.
that I would recommend.
Nice. Now, what is your favorite consumable plant to grow personally?
Personally, I'm a big cucumber person. I love to grow cucumbers. Just a whole variety of that. Obviously, the heirloom tomatoes. These are my
Nice,
two
nice.
personal
I'm a big
favorites.
pickle fan, so I grew cucumbers for the first time
Right.
last year, and then got into pickling, and that was a whole adventure in and of itself.
Yeah, pickling is cool. Actually, when I had more time on my hands, I used to grow and pickle. With that's just it's a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah, and there's many nutritional benefits to us humans for consuming fermented foods and beverages.
In a huge way. I've been drinking kombucha for years because of that. I mean, anything fermented in my world is a big friend, huge asset.
Yeah, because whenever you're introducing something that's beneficial to your microorganisms in your digestive system, you're just benefiting yourself in the long run.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, do you have any, I guess, gardening tips that you feel is like a secret weapon, or maybe something that might be outside of the fertilizer realm that you can think of that is a go-to tactic that you think really drives success in the garden?
Absolutely. And this is one of the most overlooked details that gardeners just simply forget because it's so common sense. Microdosing. Don't ever give a plant the full dosage of food at one time. If you love to garden as much as guys like you and I do, um, if let's say it calls for 2 pounds hypothetically in one of your larger grow bags, start out with a quarter pound, and then instead of waiting the 8 weeks, why don't you just wait a week, week and a half, and then give it another pound, and then so on and so forth, so that this way by the end of the 8 week period, you've broken up that 2 pounds into four different applications. So microdosing, giving it a quarter of the amount that's prescribed, is a very good way to really gain 100% of the nutritional attributes of any fertilizer, always. And then secondly, if you can use a liquid fertilizer every time you water, same exact thing, you can go down to 10-15% of the fertilizer. So let's just say it calls for 2 ounces per 1 gallon. We'll use a quarter of an ounce for the gallon, and every time you water, because if plant roots are receiving nutrients with every single watering, but a small amount, they're going to do much better than getting the entire load at once in one feeding application. So that's always been one of my secret tricks. Give it just 25% of what it needs.
That makes total sense because you think of. I always say people and plants are more similar than most people realize, and you know, would you rather eat one huge meal a day, or would you rather break that up into three or four smaller meals? I think most people would agree that breaking it up makes the most sense, and to me, that's how I like to fertilize my plants. Is just how you described there. So that's awesome that you mentioned that. Now, where can people go for more information on, Dr. Earth? I'm assuming you guys have a lot of educational resources that people can get a hold of.
Absolutely. Just visit us at drearth.com, drearth.com. Um, it's a very extensive website, Eric, and I've written 3 books. The literature from all 3 books have been flowed into the entire website. Um, there's also a lot of catalogs that they can download that I've been writing since 2001. There's got to be at least 14, 15 catalogs on our website that they can download. So it's a very, very educational website. I really pride myself on educating the gardener so that they can be successful and draw their own conclusion as far as what works best for them and their families and their garden.
Right. Yeah. And at the end of the day, gardening should be fun. It shouldn't be, a chore or, monotonous because, then you're not getting the benefit out of it. So I guess, did you have any last, words to pass along to our viewers here on, just gardening in general?
Um, yes, just because it says organic, read the label, educate yourself, and not everything organic is good. There's a huge difference. Not everything that's organic is sustainable. Not everything that's organic should be used. And every gardener should really educate themselves as to, and not everything that's organic is humane. And that's a big part of organics. I mean, what is sustainability? A big part of it just can't be whether it's carbon based or whether it hasn't been sprayed with a chemical. A big part of it is like, well, what's the humane ramifications of using an ingredient like this? I mean, that's a big part of it. I mean, feel comfortable with what you're using, and
Absolutely.
and grow in the best containers in the world. Use smart pots
Well,
like I do.
that's a given, right?
Absolutely. You guys make the best breathable pots, and I'm a huge fan. And have to bring you out to the ranch sometime and show you how your containers are being used at the Dr. Earth home.
I know, Milo, thank you so much for your time today. This has been really educational, uplifting, and I hope gardeners, if you're not already using Dr. Earth products, check it out. It'll really help your garden.
Thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you.
Feeling very mutual. Thanks.